Today's episode of the Nick Taylor Horror Show is brought to you by Diabolic DVD. For almost 20 years, Diabolic DVD has been the source for horror, cult, and weird cinema to customers around the world. Diabolic offers a one-stop shopping experience for all of your favorite labels, including Arrow, Synapse, Vinegar Syndrome, Severin, Mondo Macabro, Blue Underground, 88, and many more from all corners of the globe. So whether you're looking for the definitive version of Suspiria or trying to upgrade your crusty old DVD of Cannibal Holocaust, Diabolic is the owner-operated small business choice you've been craving. Shop online at diabolicdvd.com. That's DIABOLIK DVD.com. We're also brought to you by Deadly Grounds Coffee. It's the #1 choice of horror fans worldwide. Nothing starts your day or night better than a delicious cup of Deadly Grounds. Whether you're hunting ghosts or fighting the next zombie apocalypse, any one of Deadly's 30-plus roasts will bring you to caffeine nirvana with the richest flavor you've ever had. Whether you're craving their Hellhound Roast, Witch's Brew, Devil's Night Roast, or Sinful Delight, order online at getdeadly.com for easy and safe shipping right to your door. We know that once you go deadly, you won't go back. Join the deadly revolution today. Be bold, be different, be deadly. Deadly Grounds Coffee. Coffee to die for and zombie approved. Get some at getdeadly.com. Welcome to the Nick Taylor Horror Show. Ryan Spindell is a writer-director who recently made his feature debut with the fantastic horror anthology, The Mortuary Collection, now streaming on Shudder. Mortuary Collection blends all the nostalgic elements of anthologies like Tales from the Crypt, Bodybags, and Creepshow, but with spooky atmospheric nods to vintage horror, all while packing a serious punch with its comedy, storytelling, and overall dedication. Sam Raimi has been a very outspoken fan of Mortuary Collection, which currently holds a 96% on Rotten Tomatoes. Beyond that, it's without a doubt one of my favorite movies of 2020. It is a must-see. Ryan and I discussed the long 7-year journey for getting this movie made and did a fair amount of geeking out along the way. There's some killer lessons here, and I hope you all enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Now, please give it up for Ryan Spindell. Ryan Spindell, good to see you, man.
Dude, this is so cool. I'm a big fan. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I've been really been looking forward to talking to you. Mortuary Collection was mind-blowingly fun and just minute-to-minute fun and funny and exciting and hilarious and just all the kind of horror tropes that we love from way back in the day in a modern way that it reminds me of 80s movies, but it doesn't feel blatantly throwbacky. You know, it's still shot in a really modern way, but the scope of this movie is pretty incredible. I mean, it's super duper ambitious. I have like 1,000 questions, but just overall, well, first of all, what does it feel like to have finally launched this movie? Because it sounds like it's been in the making for quite some time.
It's incredible. I mean, this is a movie that I wrote in 2012. I wrote it as an anthology feature, first and foremost, because it's a format that I love very much. And then when it didn't seem like it was possible for us to get an anthology feature made because they are incredibly difficult, I would warn anybody who wants to make an anthology movie that it is not something that you're going to easily get financed as of this given time that we're recording this. But because we'd made a lot of shorts in the past, we knew how to do that. And so we could take one piece of the movie and make it. So we made the Babysitter Murders, which is one of the stories way back in 2015. And then a year later, we got a little bit of money and we started cobbling together the rest of the movie over the course of 2 years. And then we premiered at Fantastic Fest last year. And we got picked up by Shudder right away, which was fantastic and exciting. Nice. And we had a nice, healthy film festival tour all lined up. The idea was traveling the world and meeting interesting filmmakers and seeing the movie with audiences. And of course, COVID-19 happened and all of those were canceled. And so after sitting on this movie just being done for over a year now, this has been a long time coming. So it's sort of surreal. This is the longest answer to the simplest question, but it's actually surreal that it's finally out there in the world because it's sort of it's been something we've just been. It's almost, we're almost numb to it. But
Yeah.
the thing that I'm definitely not numb to is the response we've been getting. I've been in a bubble for so long. You don't really know if the movie you made even works for people, and you really can't tell until it starts sort of getting out there and being shown to the people you made it for. And some of the responses have been overwhelming. I mean, it's interesting because the reviews are awesome, and I love the reviews, and some of them are so beautifully written, and I'm like learning about myself and the movie that I made through the reviews, which is really exciting. But I think it's like it's the personal messages that you get. It's somebody wrote a post on Facebook today where she just talked about how inspiring the movie was to her, and I realized that she was exactly who the movie was made for, and to have sort of that kind of impact on somebody is more than anybody I think can ever hope to achieve, and I'm just humbled by the whole experience.
That's great. Because, you make a movie like that for very specific fans. And I'm sure you are that type of fan. So to get that sort of resonance with the right person, I mean, that's got to be worth the whole thing right there.
I mean, and it's when you take everything else away, when you take this idea of money. And I guess at one point in time, people thought that filmmaking was glamorous. I'm not sure if that's the case anymore. But I think when you take all that away and you remember why you started it to begin with, and the craft of filmmaking and the art behind it all. I don't know. It's sort of like I'm still sort of processing it all right now, and I'm grateful for what success we've had so far. And if it ends today, I will be happy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm heartbroken that you were cheated out of a theatrical run, or at least being able to see the movie in a theater with an audience during the festival run. I mean, this would have been such a blast to see live. I don't mean to rub it in, but I mean, now having seen it, I just can't help but think, fuck, it would have been great to have seen that with a live audience. It's such an audience pleaser.
It is an audience movie. I mean, and that's the kind of like, one of the things that I love about the anthology format. The anthology format isn't tied down by the same rules that a lot of the more traditional format is, and it's a playground. And that's what I loved about Creepshow. I loved the animation and the sort of wild lighting swings and the sort of over the top characters. Like, I love that kind of stuff. And this was definitely sort of like a place to play and really think about audience expectations and sort of what they expect, and how can we subvert that, and how can we shock them, and how can we hold things back and then give them too much, and sort of but that's all movies, I guess. And I do think that when I wrote this movie, I mean, I remember when I decided to write this movie, and I knew it was never going to be a theatrical movie. It just it's not. I don't think people are the format itself. Even if you made the best anthology in the world, I don't know if the audience is ready for it to be to sort of at a theatrical level.
Right.
And so yeah, I don't know if I was ever expecting that, but I did really look forward to film festivals and meeting my peers and the people who I see releasing movies right now at the same time, who I would have imagined I would sort of be able to get drinks with and sort of commiserate over the pains of the filmmaking process.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, once this all lifts, there'll be more festivals for sure. Yeah. But it still sucks. I mean, it still really, really does suck for sure.
I just need 7 more years to make another movie.
So this took 7 years all in all.
Oh, I mean, maybe longer. Yeah, it was quite a process. It was, somebody joked it was like the boy of horror movies.
Did The Boy take a long time to make?
Boy, wait, is it The Boy? What is the one with the Richard Linklater movie?
Not Spanking the Monkey. That was
no.
What's his name?
It's the one that he shot over the course of several years, where the kid grows up.
Oh, that's right. Ethan Hawke is in it. I totally forgot. Yeah.
I love Ethan Hawke, by the way. Can we just talk about how great
I know
he is?
Ethan Hawke is great. I wish there were more Sinister movies.
Yes.
I wish to God there were. I think the Sinister movies, I enjoy those more than the Insidious movies. I think the Sinister movies are terrifying. There was some horror movie. There was some article that came out about the scariest horror movies of all time based on, they did these ratings on people, and they actually looked at how their heartbeat would respond and their overall stress response to movies. Sinister was number 1.
Really?
Yeah. It caused more angst and actual tension in people than any other. And they did, I mean, they didn't do every horror movie, but they did all the major ones, Exorcist, Texas Chainsaw, all of that. And people were more scared by Sinister than anything. The body responded more
Is that? Would you say that's your scariest movie experience?
Definitely not Sinister. No, I mean, Exorcist for sure, and everybody says that, but I saw it at such a young age. I was still impressionable. Still was kind of borderline religious. I was raised semi-religious, so I still believed some of that at that time. So I kind of just went with it. And then I thought I felt my bed shake, and I was young. I was like 12 years old, and to me, I grew up on a show called Sightings. Which, did you ever see Sightings?
I don't think so. No,
it was like a precursor for the X-Files. So there was Sightings they basically positioned it as a news program where they had it was kind of like Rescue 911 for paranormal experiences, and they would have people giving their firsthand experiences with paranormal entities, and every single week it was something different. Like it was ghosts one week, it was killers another week, it was aliens one week, chupacabra one week, and so every week I had like something else to be afraid of. Like I was petrified of aliens for a long time. What's that?
That sounds like a great show. I'm surprised
I know.
They haven't tried to reboot it. That sounds really cool.
It would be great to reboot. Yeah, I'm trying to find the old episodes. It was the inspiration for the X-Files. Because of the population of that show, they said, how do we spin this into something scripted? That became the X-Files. But
amazing.
Yeah, it was so frightening. But then they had one episode on demonic possession, and that blew my mind, because anything else you can outrun, but you can't outrun something like a demon that's inside of you. So that scared the fuck out of me. Then I saw, because I was total, masochist, saw The Exorcist, and then that just totally fucked me up for a while.
I think The Exorcist is so fucking scary, but I am not a religious person. I was not raised religious at all, so it doesn't have that sort of extra level for me that it had for so many people I know. I'm kind of envious, but I'm glad I wasn't raised religious, but I'm envious that I don't get to feel that like deep, like.
Yeah. I was saying some Hail Marys that night for sure.
Oh yeah. Oh, I bet.
Was there a movie that was that for you, that like super traumatizing at a young age?
Yeah. I mean, mine's actually a little cliche as well. It's, I saw Nightmare on Elm Street when I was like 5.
Whoa.
It was like kind of a mistake. My dad had this friend who would always give us boxes of VHS bootleg movies, and my dad never even looked through them. So me and my siblings would dig out the sort of movies, and I remember watching it when I was 5, and it actually turned me off of horror movies for most of my young life.
Really?
I didn't really do it till I was probably 12 or 13. Yeah, it really affected me. But the most visceral movie that I've ever experienced, and this is again a time and a place, is the remake of The Ring, which I know is kind of a controversy.
Really? I haven't even seen that.
You haven't seen the remake of The Ring?
Oh no, the American version of The Ring, of Ringu. Oh yeah, I have seen.
Yeah.
They just did a new one last year. That's the one I thought you were talking about, but no, just The Ring. Yeah, with Naomi Watts. That one. The
Naomi Watts one. And it's funny. Like people swing. Some people are like, I hated it, and some people are like, it's so scary. But I literally remember gripping the armrest in the theater. It was so intense to me, and I don't know why. It just hit at the perfect time. I think I was like a freshman in college or something.
Oh, nice. Yeah, the imagery in that is pretty amazing. I just watched it recently, and it holds up. Totally holds up to this day.
I'll go to bat for Gore Verbinski for all of his movies, including The Lone Ranger. I'm saying it here.
I thought The Lone Ranger was perfectly good. I don't know why it got such bad reviews. It was like it was a Western Pirates of the Caribbean. It even had Johnny Depp in it. It was just as good as the Pirates of the Caribbean sequels. I'll put it that way.
It's so fun, man. It has some of the best set pieces. I have so many friends that are like, that movie's garbage. I'm like, did you see it? And nobody's actually seen it. I think we're the only 2 people that saw it.
I think so too. I think it's just us. Johnny Depp should write to both of us just a thank you letter. So how did the movie come together? I mean, I know it was a long time, but can you walk us through the process of, original idea to getting this thing made? And
sure, yeah. I mean, I had been in LA for a few years, and I'd written a couple of scripts that I was really proud of, and they were in development. And I was this one specific script that was like a very hard R horror movie, and the note I kept getting was, make it more teen, and it was set in high school. I was getting so frustrated with that note, and just kind of disenfranchised in general with what horror was at the time.
Yeah.
And I always loved Creepshow, but I'd also been like getting into the old Amicus anthology films from England, and I was really loving the format, and I started thinking about like, well, what's a format that I love that like nobody's doing? Again, keep in mind this is 2012 when the anthology, before it sort of started hitting its heyday again. And I was thinking a lot about short stories and how much I love Ray Bradbury's short stories and Stephen King's short stories, and Richard Matheson, who's an amazing writer who wrote so many of the original Twilight Zones. And I was like, I think horror works so good in short format. Is there a way I can package it so I can kind of get these shorts to a wider audience? Because at the time, you could really only see shorts at film festivals. And so I wrote the Mortuary Collection, which basically I had a big document of short ideas, and I took my 4 favorite ones, and I started working on the wraparound. And the wraparound story, one of my big complaints of a lot of anthology movies, especially when I started getting into them and watching everything, was the wraparound stories tend to be these kind of like weak bookends that are sort of an afterthought. And so I started thinking a little bit more about these characters, these narrators who are telling us these stories. The Crypt Keeper, we go into his crypt, and he tells us a story, and he performs, and he does the puns, and we have a good time. But what happens when we leave? Like, is he sad? Is he lonely? Is he trapped? Mm-hmm. Like, why is he telling us these stories? And I think through doing that, I started to unpack some interesting, maybe some interesting character sort of bits that could be part of an onion. Unpeeling the onion on that character. And that's where the wrap. What would happen if that character was supernaturally bound to that place and forced to tell these stories as part of some sort of larger karma?
Yeah.
Sort of paying for sins committed. And so that sort of really got me excited about the wraparound and really started to develop that. And that actually became kind of the primary story, and the vignettes themselves kind of became not one-offs because they're a meat of the movie. They're the meat of the movie, but but not the sort of, not the number one driving force. And so I wrote all the whole thing together, and it kind of went through a few drafts, and I started sending it out. I had some reps at the time, different reps, and I sent it to them, and I was really excited about it. And they were like, nobody is going to make this movie. People hate anthology movies. You can't name one anthology movie that's good. And I was like, Trick or Treat. And they were like, no, that was a big flop. Like, something else, anything. And I was like, I don't have one. Like, that's the whole point. I'm trying to do something different because I think if we can do it right, it'll be interesting and new. And they said no. And so, but people were really loving the script in general. Nobody would pull the trigger on it.
Yeah.
And so what I did is I was like, well, I'd made a bunch of shorts before. So let's do a Kickstarter. Let's pick one of the shorts. Let's pick the one that's the most contained and the most easily to produce, and one that sort of has a nice zing to it. And then let's raise a little bit of money and make it and show people what the movie is going to be. And so I picked The Babysitter Murders, which was the most contained short. And we did a little Kickstarter campaign, and we made that in 2015. And that movie did really well on the festival circuit, and I got some fancy new reps out of it, and I did the water bottle tour here in Los Angeles, and people were really excited, but they were still a hard no on the full feature. It was just, and I did come to find out later that the reason that everyone says no, even if they're fans, is that marketing departments, they don't know how to sell it, and I guess marketing departments are ultimately the people who make the decisions on the thumbs up or the thumbs down.
Wow.
And so even if an executive is super crazy about something, if the marketing department says no, it's a pass.
Yeah, because that's the biggest expense. I mean, you can be Blumhouse, you can make a $2 million, $3 million movie, but then $20 million to market the hell out of that thing with advertising and social media and all of that.
Yeah, and it's a niche movie too, I guess.
Yeah.
And I don't think. And so what happened through the course of all these meetings is I went to one meeting, and an executive there named Allison Friedman was like, my boss would never make this movie, but I love it, and I love the script, and do you mind if I try to raise some money on the side? And I said yes, of course, because we just say yes to everything, but we don't expect anybody to come through. And about 6 months later, she called me up out of the blue, and I was like, I was almost had forgotten that we even had a meeting, and she was like, hey, I found a little bit of money. Do you want to make this? And I said, yes, of course. So Allison, and then my producing partner, Justin Ross, who's made all my movies since film school, the three of us got together and started trying to figure out how we were going to make the movie. And at the time, we had met with 3 line producers, and each one of them had basically said, you need 4 times as much money to actually make this movie.
Wow.
This is impossible to make. So people that we were going to pay to work on the movie were basically saying, we can't even take this on. It's not achievable.
Whoa.
And so we were sitting on a little bit of money, and I was like, I think if we don't start making this movie, it's the classic like filmmaker thing. It's like, let's just start making it before we don't have anything.
Right.
And so we did. We basically like really quickly kind of pulled together everything we know about making shorts, and all of our friends who, owed favors to us for working on their shorts, and the connections we'd made being here. And we started making the movie, and we kind of pieced together the movie piece by piece. Once that started, it was about 2-year process. Shooting on, we did 3 sort of principal shoots, and then we did 12 or 13 maybe tiny little fragmented shoots. Like I painted one of the walls in my apartment for pickups, and then we shot pickups against that wall. I shot some stuff in my friend's backyard. Me and my producer went to the woods up in Oregon and just shot some drone stuff of my friend's son riding a bike through the town at the beginning. So there's so many parts of it that were made in the way that you make movies when you're, in high school.
Yeah.
Just all the same things that you learn just because you don't have a choice. It's at some point you're like, well, I'm 90% through a feature film. We don't have any money left, but we still have to make this, and it has to be great. And interestingly, those moments where it was just 3 of us in the woods were the most satisfying, because they kind of reminded me why we do what we do. We're like, holy shit, this shot with just the 3 of us in the woods looks like it fits right in with the shot we did with a 40-person crew, which is cool and illuminating. And not to say anything against that 40-person crew, because they're incredible, and you want that 40-person crew if you can have them, for sure.
Yeah.
But I think it's also a testament to just like being stubborn bastards about trying to get a movie done.
I feel like that's what you got to be. Well, I'm sure that there's a benefit to it being an anthology film, that you can you can go through these sprints of shooting. You can shoot one part, and then you can put it down for a while and regroup and raise more money or whatever, and then you can pick it back up and not have to worry about actors aging and people's schedules not lining up and stuff like that. Well, I'm sure that still comes into play.
It's true. Yeah. No, I mean, that's the great part too, because when you make a short, you focus all of your energy down onto this one condensed thing. And so you can really think, you're like, oh, I'd like to have a poster in the background, and I'll have my friend graphic design it, and it will give a clue to the movie. Like those cool little details that like really, add the layers to a movie where you can watch it a second time and you can see more. And you'd realize that if you go to make a feature on an independent budget, that stuff's just going to go out the door. You're shooting in 15 days, like all those fun details and those little clever like tricks that you want to do. That's the first thing that gets cut.
Yeah.
So one advantage we did have was we were able to do that, to really like layer in the sort of the details into the production design, into the background, the little clues and the little hints throughout that I think made it special. I mean, the flip side is that no human being should be in production for 2 years straight when you're sort of writing, directing, producing, sometimes camera operating, production designing. I think it's like the human body can only take so much abuse before it starts to sort of reject it altogether. So then
it becomes Hearts of Darkness. Well, I mean, as far as the look of the movie, I mean, the set design and the details and the world building was really amazing. I mean, it was like on a Tim Burton level, So how did you approach the look and feel of the movie? Because it's so detail oriented, and the singularity of vision is just it's beautifully, beautifully done. It does not feel inexpensive. It does not feel like a low budget movie at all. It feels like a very big production for sure.
Thanks. Thanks. No. It's I mean, that's a huge compliment. It was something we clearly put a lot of time and energy into. And I guess my background is my background is sort of arts and sort of design, and I'm very much of a hands-on person. And I worked in the sort of art department for a long time too. So I think when we went into making this movie, one of the first things we talked about was this idea of like, when you tell a campfire, it's supposed to have a campfire story type of vibe to it, where like sit around a campfire, you tell a story. It's not really of a time or a place. It kind of is timeless and sort of just exists now and always. And so that was kind of the emphasis, to kind of lean into the period or the periodless nature of the whole movie. Of course, that's like so difficult to pull off on an independent budget, because you can't shoot anything as it exists. Everything has to be retrofitted, painted, you need vintage cars. And it even comes down to what you don't think about as an independent filmmaker, where you're like, oh, I had an old house and I got a cool old car. We can pull this off, right? But then you forget like hair, like period hair will take you right out of it really quickly. So you need a kick-ass person to do hair. You need makeup. Costumes have to be legit. They can't be too fresh or too crisp, or it takes people out. So the amount of different people that have to come together to build a world like this is really staggering. And I think it was something, having worked in the art department before and having a lot of experience in like how money gets spent on films, I was able to I knew that we needed to really put a lot of money into the design. And so from the very beginning, I started pulling money from other departments and pushing that right into art department to give them what they needed to sort of pull it off. Now, that being said, I didn't give them what they needed because I couldn't possibly give them what they needed to pull off this movie. So Lauren Fitzsimmons and her team of the whole art team just really came together and did something special. And I think it was like, once we started to create parts of the movie that looked like they did, we kind of set the bar so high that we couldn't really go backwards.
Yeah.
And so it was a lot of, and of course, because I had moved so much of the money in the budget towards the art department, that meant we had to sacrifice time, we had to sacrifice equipment, we had to sacrifice crew. So like, there's no coverage in the movie. Everything is sort of 1 to 3 takes tops, and we just had to plan it really well and sort of move to get it all, to pull it off. And it was scary as shit, because you shoot a whole segment and that vintage house and all those props go away, and you're just like, holy shit, I hope we got it. We're blazing right now. And I was rewriting the script on the fly as we went, and it was really a scary process. I joked it's the extreme sports of careers.
Yeah. But I mean, goddamn, did it pay off looking at it. I mean, there's even these little throwaway shots for like 2 seconds that you must have agonized over, that are just, every shot is just really beautifully done. So
I have
awesome.
a problem. I can't do anything without being obsessive about it. It's a gift and a curse, like to the nth degree.
But I feel like for directors, it's so important in a lot of cases to have some sort of a visual style, a visual aesthetic. I mean, there's the big ones like Wes Anderson and Guillermo del Toro, and you can see their looks. But I feel like with a lot of filmmakers, their first few films, it's not what they're thinking about or doing. But this is such a strong look. I mean, just, it feels like you have a very established aesthetic,
Thanks,
which is
man.
super cool.
And those filmmakers you talked about, I think those were the filmmakers that drew me into the genre and filmmaking to begin with. I first came into it because of the aesthetic of Sam Raimi and Peter Jackson and Terry Gilliam and these art creators that sort of were creating, fantastical worlds. That was my in, and since then it's been like, okay, the design is kind of the easier part. Now it's all about story and performance, and how do we really elevate this into something special?
Yeah. So the balance between humor and horror is always difficult to achieve, but this movie did it in a very natural way. I mean, there are legitimately scary moments, but then there's also, just like, I was laughing my ass off the whole movie. Was there any approach to the balance between horror and comedy? And I've said in a couple other episodes, but apparently the balance is 80% scary, 20% funny. But what was your approach to balancing humor and horror?
I think that percentage does the tracks. I definitely love horror and comedy fused, and I feel like I've spent most of my career in shorts just testing the waters, pushing it hard to horror, pushing it harder into comedy. I can say about when you push hard into horror, your likelihood of success goes way up, because the hardcore horror fans are going to be fine with the straight horror. And unfortunately, that's not really where my tastes lie exactly. I just have this like Spielberg-y streak where I wanted to start leaning into a little bit of comedy and a little bit of sort of fantasy. Yeah. And I've done other films that lean too heavy into that, where I'm like, oh, that alienated too many people. And so I feel like the trick that I kind of came up with is I write the script as funny as I want it to be. And then I get my cast to perform it as serious as possible.
Interesting.
So the content, what is happening is humorous, but when you have great actors that are treating it straight, you get this weird fusion of like, you believe that they believe what they're doing, and therefore it's still working on an emotional level, but you're getting that humor kind of under the surface.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you about that, about how you worked with your actors on it, because it's so important as a director to make sure everybody's making the same movie. And with a movie like this, it's a very specific world and it's a very specific tone. At least it felt that way. And across all of the different stories, it was very, very consistent. So the actors seem to all be on the same level as far as that's concerned. But I mean, how did you get your actors on that level? I mean, how did you explain the world, the tone, and exactly what you were going for?
Yeah, it was tricky because going back to sort of writing it kind of zany, a lot of the actors came in thinking they were playing a comedy, and I had to sort of push them to be back into serious territory because of the same balance I was just talking about. Which became a challenge. The actors I worked with were so fucking great across the board that it wasn't like, it didn't kill me. And honestly, because again, going back to this idea of trimming all your resources down to the bare bones, we didn't really have time to sort of sit down with an actor and get them to figure out each nuance. They kind of had to come bringing the base level of good, and then we could sort of work it towards great.
Yeah.
But what I like to do, and this is sort of never having the sort of resources to really do a lot of like rehearsal or any of that sort of business. One little trick that I found that I like quite a bit is that I will schedule one day with the actors to sort of sit down with them like over a key scene. Mm-hmm. And I'll just sort of run the scene with them. And then I'll just sort of say like, all right, anything's on the table. Let's talk about it. Let's just break it wide open and talk about it and see if we can find some interesting things. And almost every single time, especially if you have some of these actors that are really collaborative, which is, I think, essential, you'll find out these little nuggets and you can actually start to really lean into them. And then what I'll do is once we find some really interesting components of the scene, then I'll go off and I'll rewrite the entire character based on that sort of play.
Oh, wow. So that it's kind of, you rewrite it to fit the actor in a way, or fit the new, whatever everybody is projecting into that scene.
100%. And it's, I mean, I think it's like, sometimes it's stuff that never comes out in the movie, but it's all about like seeing a face on the screen and seeing the gears inside turning, and whether or not you know what those gears are turning towards. If you see them turning, you understand it as human, and it sort of works a little bit better. And then sometimes entire character subplots will sort of blossom out of these meetings. That like it's my favorite shit. Like again, like my background, art and design, I worked as a special effects guy for a while in a special effects house. Like I've done all of these like spectacle things, and I love that as a filmmaker and a huge nerd. But man, all the special effects and all the sort of wow factor in the world can't compete with an actor just crushing it in a scene. It's just something to watch.
Yeah, and the performances were great in this movie too. And it's like I hate to say this, but with like horror movies, you don't always expect the best performances, especially when they're funny and a little zany. Some people think they don't have to be, but the acting in this was superb. And that just makes everything work so much better. I mean, how did you approach casting? What was your casting process like?
So because this movie has a huge cast, for the budget level, it's such a ridiculous cast. It's stupid. And luckily I live in Los Angeles and I've been here for 12 years. So I know a lot of actors. So the first thing I did is start thinking, who are the best actors I know and how many roles can I plug them into? And that literally took care of about 85% of the casting.
Oh, that's great.
And I knew these people would deliver, and there was a sort of a familiarity on set that sort of we could pull out. I mean, some of these are just friends of mine that I've never worked with before. There's people I know socially. Yeah. And then from there, there's a few key roles that we had to cast through our casting director, Rich Mento, who was awesome. And he sent us Jacob Elordi, who plays Jake in Unprotected, the second story. And he had just done this movie called The Kissing Booth for Netflix, but it hadn't come out yet. And it ended up being a phenomenon like a couple of weeks after we got on shooting with him. But he's this like young actor who just is phenomenal. I mean, he's just great. The first day I worked with him, I was like, oh, he's going to be like in a Marvel movie in like 3 years. Like, so like we had some wins like that. And of course, Clancy Brown, the crown jewel of the whole project, this character actor who I've been obsessed with for most of my life. I tend to love character actors. I like people that disappear into roles, more so than people that play the same thing again and again. And he was one of our top picks, and was just when he read it and was interested, I was like, it was a staggering day. And I remember they were like, you have to go to a diner
so cool
to meet him. And I was like, oh, is he going to do it? And they're like, no, he's going to sit down and have lunch with you and then decide if he wants to work with you. And I was like, fuck me. Like, I have to sit there with Clancy Brown and like be an interesting person. Like, I'm so bad at being an interesting person when someone tells me to be an interesting person. And of course he's like, he's a giant. So it's extra intimidating. And he's like the nicest guy in the world. Like, I love that I don't have to lie about it, that I don't have to like, he's great. Everyone loved him. And he was like a piece of shit because he's actually like he was the coolest guy. And like, dude's worked with the best directors in the world and has like, there was no trailers on this. There was nothing. There was just like us in an old house shooting this like lurch-like character. And he just like brought this like energy to the set that made everybody feel so jazzed to be there, which it could have gone so differently.
That's so cool. Yeah, it's always wonderful to have that one person on set who kind of is the team leader in a way, silently, who from a morale perspective just keeps everybody going. Because, as a director, you're doing so many things at once. It's hard to keep that morale going. But when you have like those kind of linchpin cast or crew members who keep everybody else's morale up, I mean, you cannot put a price on that.
It is. And especially like when you're trying to achieve, I don't mean ambition, but just when you're trying to do, there's like a lot of like camera tricks in this and a lot of like weird little, again, the kind of stuff that would normally get trimmed away from a movie because of time. And that kind of stuff really can wear people down. I mean, it's tough because we would shoot whole sequences and the crew wouldn't have any idea how it was going to come together. It was just these weird little fragmented parts, and people can start to sort of start losing faith or kind of get out and get tired, and people get grouchy on set. But luckily, because we'd had the Babysitter Murders, and the Babysitter Murders is such a like sort of like a visual showpiece for what the movie was going to be, we were able to show people that and give them a little bit more confidence. Right. And then, of course, I mean, if you can imagine those sets, like once we started shooting on those sets and people started seeing the images come across on the monitor, we started winning people over. But there's always that tricky part when you're a director and you're like, you can be moving fast and you can be fun and everyone can be light and you're playing music on set, and people can have a great experience of the shoot, but that doesn't necessarily translate to a great movie. And the harder the more you're trying to achieve, the harder it is to keep your crew jazzed about it. So it's a balance for sure.
I feel like that's a really important point to make. Is I mean, particularly with a movie like yours that is so detail oriented, where just agonizing over the details really makes a huge difference in the look of the movie and just those shots. Throughout the course of getting those shots, the crew might not really realize why they're doing what they're doing, and that can cause a burnout. Whereas if they know what they're doing is actually going to be purposeful, that just gets people jazzed and helps them, push through it. I mean, having talked to like Roger Corman, he basically had this just keep shooting mentality. Like he would get a shot, he wouldn't look at it, he would just kind of keep on going. And I do think that works to a certain degree. But I mean, with a movie like this one, where there is so much to shoot and so many details, I think a lot of people overlook the importance of just keeping your crew informed as to what they're creating while they're creating it, because that can boost their morale and give them a whole other surge of energy and you activating their passion for the project while you're doing it. I feel like it's something a lot of people overlook, is just showing the crew either the dailies or, showing them what they're making while they're making it, because that is just fuel on the fire of their passion, whereas they easily could burn out. It's one of two ways.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, that's such a great point too. Cause I mean, genuinely, I'm a people pleaser anyway. Like I want everyone to like me. It's like, I don't know what it is. Something about being from a small, I don't know, but it's like,
I know what you're saying.
Yeah, and so it's like, but of course, nothing trumps like the movie I'm trying to make. So I'm constantly torn between like, is the crew happy? But I got to get this right, and I got to do it again, even if people think I'm insane. And so I'm constantly like battling this sort of back and forth, and you kind of start to understand why filmmakers will work with the same teams again and again, because it's people that know what you're going after and trust that you're going to get there, as opposed to having to reprove yourself to a new group of people every single time. Yeah. Which can be tiresome. And at some point in time, you just have to say, they're just not going to like me right now, but they'll like me when they see it, and hope that that's the truth.
Yeah. Hate me now, love me when you see the movie. Yeah. It's tough to earn that trust as a director, It's definitely
Very,
tough, particularly early
very.
in your career, for sure.
Yes, because everyone. I mean, I worked on sets as well. I've did G&E. I did art department. I know what it's like to be like, I want to be the person that's directing. Why
Hmm.
is this person directing? Prove to me that you're the person that should be directing and not me. Like that it feels that way on set, whether you wanted to admit it or not.
Yeah.
And you know that once it flips and you're suddenly at the helm, and then it becomes sort of like, yeah. I mean, there could be a whole podcast just about sort of personalities and set etiquette. I think I could even learn a few things from that.
Yeah, there's so much that goes there. I mean, you have to deal with egos in certain cases, but you just also have to deal with harmony and making sure that people match properly, personality
Mm-hmm.
wise. So many dynamics there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There was
Mm-hmm.
probably a podcast idea there for sure. It's funny nowadays. There was just there was an article in the New York Times about how horror anthologies are having a heyday right now.
Saw that.
And
Cool.
for the longest time, horror anthologies were basically just verboten. But between Mortuary Collection and Books of Blood and Nightmare Cinema and Scare Package, I mean, yeah, horror anthologies now it seems like people are starting to love them again, which is great.
Good. Yeah. I mean, this is what needs to happen. Enough. The problem is that I feel like they've drifted away from the public consciousness. And so people don't know what they are. So like an uninitiated person, I mean, us horror fans know, but
Yeah.
some people would sit down and suddenly they're watching a story and it ends and they're like, wait, what? I don't like this. This isn't what I'm used to. So like in general, we just need to get them out more.
Right.
But even all the movies you mentioned, those are all little tiny movies financed by passion more than anything else. I think maybe Books of Blood, which I saw last night actually, and quite enjoyed.
I enjoy the hell out of it.
Yeah, I've heard some flack. It's got some flack, but I thought it was very cool. It seemed to have a pretty significant budget. I don't know what the history is.
Yeah,
with
I think
that
it was
one.
up there.
It was actually, I could tell it had like a TV at least budget. Like
Yeah.
it just had the polish. But then like, I don't think American Horror Story is an anthology show. I for some reason I take offense to these season long series being called anthology.
I wouldn't call that an anthology. No, although it would be cool if they did an anthology season where every episode was a different story.
Yes. Then yes, that would be awesome. Actually, they might be doing that. I may have
Really?
heard that they're doing that. I think so. I
That'd
think it's
be
called
cool.
like American Horror Stories.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Okay, I have to be on the lookout for that.
I mean, the tricky thing, what you discover about it that was sort of enlightening to me was I knew it was going to be tricky because for the obvious reasons, right? Like you're telling 5 stories. That means you need 5 sets of characters. You need 5 sets of locations. Maybe there's multiple locations in one short.
Mm-hmm.
And I think each one needs a climax. Climaxes tend to be sort of something you got to spend some more time, a little more resources on to get them right because you need them to be satisfying. So I knew all that stuff going into it, and I was like, I'm down for this. I can attack this movie. It's going to be hard, but I think it's going to be worth it.
Yeah.
The part that really caught me off guard was in the editing room because you realize that like when you're doing a traditional feature, there's sort of these like certain signposts in a movie that you have to knock out of the park. And if you knock them out of the park, even if you drop the ball in the rest of it, the movie people will walk away happy. Like if you get a great character introduction, if you have a great sort of midpoint, and if you have like a really stellar ending, people walk out of the theater or turn off the streamer and be like, that was great. I love it. I want to tell people about it. And those moments take so much time in the editing room. That's where you put all of your energy, and hopefully the whole movie's good, right? But like at least hit these signposts.
Yeah.
So what we realized with this was that like, oh, we have to hit those 5 signposts 5 times, and we can't really drop the ball in any of them. So then it became like, oh, now we have a editing schedule that's like standard for a regular feature, but we have to create 5 sets of story components, and they all have to be banger, or people are going to, do what they always do in anthologies, just immediately start attacking the weakest episode. And that's the thing that they're going to walk away talking about, like, the movie was fine, but this one episode sucked. And so that like was a stressful time where we were just like pulling all-nighters, like, oh man, I don't know if we can pull this off in this schedule because we just hadn't considered it. And even my editor was just like, this is so much. I'm like, I know, just buckle in. We got to do it. Let's go. So that's something to keep in mind. I think if anybody's thinking about attacking this kind of format is you really got to give yourself a lot of time in the editing room.
Yeah. No, I mean, you literally directed 5 movies here. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not sugarcoated. Like that's a lot, and it's a lot to think through, and all those arcs and everything. How did you find your editor?
So my editor, we actually had 2 editors on the movie, which is the case in several of the positions because of how long it took us to get this movie made.
Right.
Which again, another reason why people shoot everything in one big go is you have one team.
Yep.
So Eric Ekman, he was our initial editor, who's again been a friend of mine for a long time. He did the Babysitter Murders way back in 2015, and he was like basically one of the key collaborators in the movie. And like, when we went to do the feature, I was like, dude, I want you to be on set every day as the script supervisor. So we'll like talk about how we're going to execute this so we can really push it and do some really interesting things.
Oh, that's great.
And he was on set. The downside was, as we were on set, I think like 2/3 of the way, I like how I'm saying this is a downside, but his wife called and said she was pregnant. And which is amazing. Congratulations to both of them. And they have a beautiful baby. But he basically said, hey, remember how I told you in our meeting that I was down to go to the ends of the earth with you on this thing? Well, it turns out we got 3 months because I'm having a baby. And so we basically we edited as much as we could with him, and then he left, and then we had to bring in another editor, and we ended up finding this awesome guy named Joe Shahood. But like at that time, the project was just like so many different shoots, and of course we didn't organize the footage in the way we should have up front. So we had all these different hard drives hanging around, and it was just like such a massive undertaking anytime somebody would come in to work on the project to try to like even find their way into it.
Wow.
Because Eric had his way of doing it. So Joe spent weeks just trying to reconfigure things so it worked for him. And it was a lot to add on top of what the already tricky aspect of editing 5 movies at once.
Jesus, man. That's a lot. Throughout the course of this, was there ever any either doubt or sort of dark night of the soul where you didn't think things were going to get better? When the difficulty was just so overwhelming, either on set or in post or anytime.
Yeah. I mean, many times. I mean, I remember having some times in Astoria, Oregon, where it was like rain, because it rains a lot there, and just having not slept and soaking wet and just having no idea how we're going to sort of pull off the immense amount of shots that we're trying to do in a day, and just feeling like, I remember actually distinctly feeling like if I was capable of having a nervous breakdown, it would happen right now.
Wow.
Like, genuinely. I was like, everything in my body says, luckily I was born with the fortitude to not crumble, and I had great parents or something, whatever it was that like protected me in that moment. But I definitely felt like I would have a nervous breakdown, because it was like, it just felt like such an impossible task. And, when you're not sleeping and when you're cold and when you're wet, and it just like, it sort of builds and builds and builds. But again, like, interesting things always come out of that. Like you're like forged in fire, and you kind of come out the other side, and you suddenly, the film gods smile on you, and the idea hits, and you figure out a way to make a scene better than it ever was before. And you're always praying, because man, I know the film gods can like bless you, but it feels like they curse you more often than not. It's rough. It's rough. And I feel like kids should know that more when they're getting excited about the glamour of what it is to be a filmmaker, because, sometimes I'll teach a film class, college level film class, and I'm just like, is there anything else you want to do that would make you happy? Because if so, you should definitely do that.
You got to watch those film gods, man. They'll forge you in fire, though. You come out you come out better and sharper. Well, was there anything that got you through those really difficult moments?
This is going to sound real basic, but there was a juice shop in this is real like nitty gritty on sort of
these little things are important.
A little thing, yeah. There was a juice shop in Astoria, Oregon, and they would sell fresh ginger shots. And this sounds ridiculous, but somehow a fresh ginger shot will like, it's almost like it's like the same feeling of taking a shot of vodka, but not the drunk, but you feel it like surges through your veins, and it feels you feel like reinvigorated. And me and my DP would take those, and literally like it would give us just the burst we need to like keep going. And that's all you need. Right? You need that push. I know that's not the emotional answer you wanted. But
no, man, all of these little tips, that's all important. So film near a juice shop, or get a juicer and a lot of fresh ginger on set.
I'm telling you, my dream was that I wanted to sort of just when you have those lulls on set and everyone's like down in the dumps, just come around and give everybody a shot of ginger. And it's wild. I can't believe I'm talking about ginger on this podcast with you right now. I'm sorry ahead of time, but
no.
Really
if it helps one person somewhere get through their really difficult shoot, makes
There
all the difference. That's awesome. So you worked with ADI on this. They did some of your effects?
They did all of our effects.
That's great. How did they get onto this movie?
Oh man. Yeah. It comes down to, again, I think having the short. That was the big part. Interestingly, for a while after making this short, my thought was there's literally no reason to make a short other than just love of the craft.
Yeah.
Like if you want to make a short for experience, great, but there's nothing like viable about making a short like in Hollywood at that given time. And where that sort of turned around was when we started going out to creative collaborators, because we had the showpiece that we could straight up send to someone and say like, look, you're way out of our league, but here's the thing we made and here's what we're trying to do. Mm-hmm. Is this interesting to you? And so what I did with the special effects is I realized that we had quite an insane amount for such a small movie. And I was talking to some really fantastic special effects guys who I'd met sort of working in LA. And I was like, I just don't know if these guys are going to be able to pull off this load that we have. I was like, I'm just going to reach out to the 3 best special effects companies in the world. And I'm just going to pour my heart out to them and see what I've got nothing to lose.
Yeah.
And so I reached out to 3 companies here in LA who I'm just obsessed with because I love practical effects. And 2 of them got back to me. One was Spectral Motion.
Yep.
And they were amazing and they gave great advice. They couldn't fit us in their schedule, but like they would have. I genuinely believe they would have if they could have. And the other was ADI. And they were like, why don't you come in and talk to us about it? We love the short. Maybe we can help. Sat down in this fancy boardroom they have. Had this meeting. They were like, how much money do you have? I told them. They like looked real sad. And I said, yeah, fuck it. Let's do it. Let's just do it. We'll build everything we can from scratch. We'll repurpose anything that we can afford. Like, we love the project. We want to be a part of it.
And for the listeners, ADI does movies like Alien versus Predator, and they do a lot of big budgeted stuff. They're doing King Kong versus Godzilla now. I mean, this is a huge studio.
Oh, yeah. They won an Academy Award for Death Becomes Her, which is one of my personal favorites.
It's a good one.
They also did Tremors. They designed Pennywise in the new It movies. They did Starship Troopers. Their shop is like the coolest place on the planet.
Oh, yeah.
And Alec Gillis, who's one of the 2 principals, he really took us under his wing with the rest of his team over there. And I mean, he was right there in the trenches with us. Like there's a segment in the movie that involves like a Lovecraftian tentacle monster. Mm-hmm. And it was one of the last things we did. And I remember calling Alec kind of in a fit of panic and saying like, I'm just really worried about this tentacle monster because tentacle monsters always look bad. And this whole short is based on this monster. If this monster gag doesn't work, the whole short falls apart. And he was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. And so he like personally made the tentacles, showed up on set, articulated them. This guy is like the guy. Yeah. He's like he's awesome, but he's just, you never expect to see this person showing up on your shitty little set and articulating a giant floppy tentacle arms, which were repurposed from the movie Tremors, actually.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, it was awesome. So like, it's those little moments that like, going back to your last question, the real sort of more heartfelt answer to how do you get through is you step back and you realize that all these amazing people are somehow putting their lives on hold to sort of make your dream come true. And if that's not enough to keep you going, then you're probably in the wrong line of work.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's a really amazing story. Whoa. Very cool. So you guys shot in Austin and Oregon and where else?
Yeah, we shot. We shot most of the movie in Los Angeles. We shot about 2/3 of the movie in Los Angeles. In the Babysitter Murders, there's a slasher movie playing on the TV. And that was part of our original shoot where we shot the short off the Kickstarter money. Okay. And what ended up happening there is we shot the short, but I still needed a slasher movie and I only had like $2,000. And so I was like, there's no way we can pull off a slasher movie in Los Angeles for $2,000. We probably could have. It just would have been really shitty. And so I'd met this guy Joe Nicolosi and his wife Stephanie on the film festival circuit. Again, going back to the value of being on the film festival circuit, meeting your peers. And they were in Austin, Texas, and I called him up, and I love his work. And I was like, "Hey man, crazy question, but I got $2,000. Can you help me make a slasher movie?" And he was like, "Yeah, we can do that." And so I flew down to Austin, Texas. He put together an entire shoot, and we shot all the components of the slasher movie plus more. We shot enough to make an entire trailer for the fake slasher movie within the movie. So we also ended up having these amazing people from Austin, Texas in our movie. So I always forget there was like another crew from the multiple crews over in Austin of like the best people they get over there. And then we shot all the stuff with Clancy Brown and Caitlin Fisher, all the mortuary stuff and all the town stuff up in Astoria, Oregon, which is where they shot all the exteriors for the Goonies.
Oh, wow.
And it's this like sleepy little foggy seaside town on the coast of Oregon that's all Victorian homes. And it's just the coolest thing. You go there and you're like, why doesn't everybody shoot here?
Yeah.
I guess it's really tricky to get to. But we were a tiny movie and we had a small footprint, so it made it great for us. And the people in the town really made the movie come to life in ways that like we never anticipated. Like I know one of the things that's really tricky about a movie of this size is like we have all these exterior shots, right? There's an opening of a kid riding through town, and we kept pushing those back because I was like, all right, we got a 40-person crew, we have so much scene to get. We can't take this whole crew to go shoot a kid riding a bike through town because every single shot's going to be like, where are we parking the trucks? Where's the bathrooms?
Right.
Where's the food going to go? It's like such a like giant ship to sort of turn on a dime. So we ended up not shooting it for the whole shoot. And then at the end of the shoot, I talked to my DP and I'm like, hey man, I think everyone's going to go home. Do you want to just stay behind and we'll just shoot all this stuff with the kid riding through town, just the two of us? And he was like, yeah. And then Justin, my producer, also stayed back. And basically my friend who lived in Portland, her son was about the same size as the actor in the movie. So he came down and he got on the costume and we just moved around Astoria and we shot all of those scenes of him, just a small crew of like 3 people. And it was wild. Like my producer, Justin, he like called the local car club, the vintage car club. And he's like, they made a radio announcement. Anyone want to be in a movie? Show up with your vintage car at 6 a.m. And all of these people showed up, and the police came and they shut down the streets for us.
Holy
and we
shit.
put these vintage cars on the street, and we were just like, again, 3 people shooting the entire opening of this movie with nothing else. And it was like the coolest. We got on the trolley, and they ran the trolley back and forth for us, and we shot off the trolley.
So
we got
cool.
to shoot on the bridges, and just that kind of thing you just can't do in any city where filming is the norm.
Yeah, I feel like that's the magic of shooting in small little cities and towns that don't get a lot of film attention. Is like they all rally to help you, and you can just get magical production value out of that. You know, you're not going to get that in LA.
No, nothing like that. And genuinely, I really loved the people we were working with too. It wasn't even just like, well, they're giving us their cars. It was like, oh, these are like awesome. These people are awesome. They're like my friends forever now. I want to like just stay in Astoria and make everything there.
That's so cool. That's really cool. So you're working on something with Sam Raimi right now. Or you 50 States of Fright. Is that out, by the way? I've not jumped on the Quibi bandwagon yet.
Yeah. Apparently, a lot of people haven't jumped on the Quibi bandwagon.
I keep meaning to, but I've not gotten there yet.
Well, I would say this: it's definitely worth checking it out for this series alone. I do think 50 States of Fright is it changed the name not long ago, but 50 States of Fright is a horror anthology series that is being produced by Sam Raimi. And the conceit behind it is really cool in that, like, I mean, the conceit is basically like one urban legend horror story for every state in the country. That's cool. That's fine. But I think what's even cooler than that is that Sam is personally basically selecting the filmmakers. He brings you out to Vancouver where they shoot, and he lets you write and direct, and he gives you a budget, and he says, like, just go.
Wow.
And you get to just make sort of like what would normally be one of my little tiny shorts, but like with a full TV like budget and schedule that, like, honestly it was staggering to me when I got there. I'd never seen that many people on a set before.
Wow.
Working on this like little short film. And And what's cool about it is it's like I think it's the only anthology thing that's happening right now at a real budget level where like filmmakers are allowed to play and sort of and make, you have to do it within like 3 days. Still you still have to like pull it off on the schedule, but like Sam protects us and let us do what we wanted. And I think the first season is really cool, and it's still getting its sort of sea legs. I think by next season, if there is a next season, I think it's going to be definitely something people are going to take notice of. But you got to get on Quibi to see it, which is sort of the tricky part and the hard sell for most people. But
no, that's all I need to hear to get on it. Yeah, that sounds great. Cool.
And I did an episode of that last season. It was it's called Scared Stiff. It's Oregon, set in Oregon, because of how much I fell in love with Astoria. I was like, I'm going to keep doing Oregon stuff. And then I wrote 2 more episodes for season 3. Which hopefully starts shooting in a couple of months.
Oh, that's great. So what's it been like working with Mr. Raimi?
I mean, I wish I could say that he's a nightmare, but he's amazing. He's like exactly the I don't know why I wish I would say that, but the never meet your heroes thing turned out not to be true for Sam Raimi. He is the guy that made me want to do it in the first place, and he's the humblest, most nicest guy you will ever meet, and that is like 100% factual. I was just talking to another filmmaker that's making a movie right now, and he's like, I can't believe it. I'm talking to Sam every night on the phone on the script.
Holy shit.
Like, so fucking nice. And I'm like, I know, it's crazy. He doesn't like, he's not like a big like showboaty, like glad handing type of guy. He's like real salt to the earth, and like just he'll have a really like in-depth conversation with anybody who's interested in talking to him, and he's just the coolest. It's definitely a dream come true for sure.
That's so wonderful to hear. Yeah, I'm not surprised. I've seen him at conventions and things like that, and he is just so present with fans and talking to people, and yeah.
Yeah, he introduced himself like that when I went to meet him. He said, "Hi, I'm Sam Raimi. I'm a big fan."
That's awesome. That's so cool. Yeah, he spoke very highly of Mortuary Collection, obviously.
He did, which was great. I mean, the Mortuary Collection was, I hadn't made the Mortuary Collection when I did 50 States of Fright, but he saw it as like right before we went to shoot, and was just such a like huge supporter of the movie to begin with. That's surreal. I forget he even has a quote on the movie. That's how wild it is.
That's amazing. Well, last few questions. So you're obviously a writer and director. Do you have any sort of a consistent writing practice? Like, do you try to hit like that Stephen King 2,000 word minimum a day, or what is your approach to writing?
My approach has been really scattershot for a long time, where I work in fits and bursts. I procrastinate for a long time, and then I write a ton at once. The best thing that's ever happened to me, I think, is that I started writing with a writing partner.
Ooh.
That sort of keeps me in check.
Yeah.
And we have a pretty cool system in place, which is we kind of based our entire system around coming up with ideas. And when I say ideas, I don't mean like an idea for a movie, but I mean like just throwing as many ideas as possible out there and trying to find the most interesting way to sort of tackle every scene. And so what we do is we do like a Google Doc. So we do like verbal discussions over the phone or in person back when we could meet in person. And then we do like a Google Doc where we start sort of just putting scenes in like slug lines. Yeah. I think it's really cool if you can figure out like a log line approach to a scene, because it forces you kind of to figure out what the scene is. And then we sort of, once we have a basic outline for a movie, we just start going back through, and just every scene we get to it and we go, okay, this is cliche. What's something different we could do? What about something else? And inevitably we start to snowball, and we start to take tangents, and the entire script starts to alter. And we try to figure out as many of those scenes as possible. But then at some point, and this is where a co-writer is great, at some point we're like, all right, let's just start writing, because we could do this forever. And then we'll basically take all those slug lines and we'll drop them right into, we use Writer Duet, which is like do you know Writer Duet?
No. What is that, software?
Yeah, it's like an online writing software where you can sort of share the same screen.
Oh, cool.
I think Final Draft does it, but we've never been able to get it to work. So we do Writer Duet. And we basically will go in and we'll drop all the slug lines in, and then we'll sort of he'll start doing a pass, and then I'll sort of rewrite it from scratch myself, because ultimately I have to direct it, so it makes the most sense for me to try to manipulate it into sort of what I ultimately want it to be. And we somehow this system that I don't know why I'm giving you so many details about, but
No, it's all
somehow
important.
this system has made it so we can write really fast. We have a lot of ideas and we're able to generate pages really quickly, and we just keep doing passes on them and just really attack it scene by scene and try to think of a way to make a scene interesting, because that's the thing that happens in horror, especially. Luckily, my co-writer is not a big horror guy, so he doesn't fall into some of the traps that like us hardcore horror fans can.
Right.
But I'm really adamant about not writing. If you wrote a scene and it's a scene you've seen 30 times before, you're doing it wrong. You have to find something interesting to keep the audience engaged. And so that's the big challenge. And we're finishing up a script now, and we're going back through and we're like, asking the hard questions, like, is this scene a cliche? Like, it was easy to write. Is it a cliche? Is there a better way to do it? Sometimes you nail it right away, but sometimes you need to, like, go back in, and sometimes your house of cards crumbles a little bit, but I think the planning process has been sort of great to I know a lot of people take the vomit approach.
Right.
And I would do the vomit approach because I think the idea of having to start from the beginning and do it all over again would be too overwhelming for me. So I think a plan is better for my brain.
Yeah. And having a writing partner, though, I mean, that just adds the whole level of accountability to it, which, like, for a lot of writers, that's 2/3 of the game is the accountability and just getting yourself to fucking sit down and do it, as opposed to idea flow and writer's block. Like, usually that ain't the problem. It's actually sitting down and doing the writing. So having a partner, that's got to be a game changer. It is.
And I'm a social person anyway. I much prefer to be around people. Back when the world was normal, I would go to coffee shops, and the busier, the louder, the better for me. I like the stimulus. So it's been essential for me.
Yeah. So coming off of this movie, which is, I mean, huge, 5 movies in one. Any other big directorial or filmmaking lessons that we haven't touched on yet that you took from this experience?
Ooh. God, I mean, I feel like I wished I'd recorded myself. I had this dream at the beginning that I was going to do like a testimonial in front of the camera every morning, just because I knew that this movie was going to be such a beast to pull off.
Yeah.
And it was, and I didn't do that. And I regret it so much because it was such a constant barrage that, like, you don't even have time to dwell on what you learned. I don't know. I don't know if I have a good answer for that. If you ask me a more specific question, I might be able to get you.
All right. Well, looking at this one of my common questions, but looking at the finished picture, what would you have invested more in and what would you have invested less in? Not necessarily money, but it could be time or money or effort or energy. But what would you have spent more on and what would you have spent less on overall?
I guess I would say that I would write. One of the things that I like to do that I think works the best in this movie is when I would write a scene. This is something I would do sometimes if I had time to do it, but I would write a scene as if I wasn't allowed to have any dialogue in the scene. Like, what if I needed to write this entire movie without any speaking?
Yeah.
And I think that really forces you to think visually in a way that we're not really accustomed to doing unless you've really been doing it for a long time. And I think some of the best stuff, like, you'll back yourself into a corner, but if you're like, I have to figure out how to do this with visuals, if you can do that and you can make most of your movie work that way, I think the movie will be a success. And I think the dialogue will become sort of ice or like a spice on the cake.
Were there any books or resources or anything that was particularly helpful for you from a creative perspective or a just overall career perspective?
Yeah. I love the Truffaut and Hitchcock book. I love Stephen King's On Writing. That's a go-to, I think, for everybody. Everyone should read that book.
Totally.
Even if you're not a writer, it's worth it.
Oh, yeah.
Screenwriting-wise, I'm a big fan of Sid Field's Writer's Workbook. Are you familiar with that one?
No, I know Sid Field's work pretty well, but I don't know the Writer's Workbook.
So Sid Field's Writer's Workbook is very similar to his, like, the go-to book. Only the Writer's Workbook ends each chapter with a exercise. And if you do each exercise in order, by the time you've finished the book, you've written a feature screenplay.
Oh, that's cool.
And that's a bit of oversimplification because there are parts and it's like, and now write the middle. But it did. Excellent. I find that book to be that book was the most helpful in just understanding structure, because what you kind of learn if you grew up Amish and you have never seen movies, you have a whole other challenge ahead of you, and maybe you make even more interesting movies, honestly. But
Maybe.
I think most of us were already kind of trained to in the format. We just need some sort of book to kind of highlight it for us to get us started.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a great one for me. And I think, like, again, Save the Cat is a go-to, I think, for like a super fun, super simple, super quick read.
Yeah.
That I reference. I haven't referenced it for a while, but like I've definitely gone back to that one a few times.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think I've got all the books, but those are the ones that sort of ping for me as like just really incredible reads and worthwhile for any filmmaker.
Okay, great. So what are you working on next? What is next for you?
Yeah, so I'm doing the two episodes of the 50 States of Fright, hopefully.
Right.
I'm finishing up another feature right now, writing, and I'm attached to write and direct a segment of a horror anthology movie for MGM. That's
great.
Yeah. Just looking for the next thing. I think it's like all of us we're always sort of trying to find that project. I'm kind of obsessive once I sort of lock in to the actual directing aspect. And I wear horse blinders, so it's like I have to be careful about which project that I tackle because it's sort of,
because you're going to go all in.
Yeah, which is great. I think I tell people, I'm like, it's terrible when you're trying to get me to look at your project and I'm on something else, but I think it's the best if I'm working on your project because I'm probably not going to sleep until it's the best thing I can possibly produce. And so it's weird. It's a weird career choice because you have to. I envy the people that just scattershot. They're like, oh, this project, sure, let's do it, and they just kind of casually slip in and slip out. And some of the people I know who do that have the most robust and they're the most successful for sure.
Really?
But I'm not that person for sure.
Well, I mean, the results speak for themselves, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, you'll have a much better, much more thorough movie if you can always tell the filmmakers who put their everything into their films, you know. So that always comes across for sure.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. Well, Ryan, this was a real pleasure, man. Great to finally meet you, and huge congratulations. Any parting words of wisdom for those aspiring filmmakers out there?
Oh man, man, what can I say that Mark Duplass hasn't already said in the Calvary's Not Coming speech? Really. Yeah, I mean, I would say that, like, I guess the common go-to is to say to just get out there and do it, and that's true to some degree.
Yeah.
But I would say find your tribe. Find people that want to make movies. They don't have to even want to make the movies you want to make, but find people to collaborate with, because this is kind of a lonely career, and people can tend to get so caught up in their own thing that they're living on islands, and we don't work together, and especially creatives. I think creatives can get so separate from each other that, you know, the suits that make the decisions kind of dictate how we live our lives, and we end up not doing things the way we wish we had. And I think find those people that inspire you and that you can inspire, and work with them, and let's take back this industry.
Yeah. Hey man, I'm with it. Rally cry. Let's go.
Rally cry.
That's awesome. Ryan, thank you again.
Nick, this is awesome, man. Again, I'm a huge fan. I think this podcast is great. I guess if you've listened to the podcast as long as you have, then you know that this is a great thing to sort of to have on your playlist.
Thanks, though, man. I really appreciate it. Thank you, and thank you for listening, for sure.
No, cool. Thank you so much for having me, dude. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep fighting the good fight, my man.
Thank you so much. Thank you. All right, so much to unpack here. Here, as always, are some key takeaways from this conversation with Ryan Spindell. Number one, choose where to invest wisely. Ryan spent a substantial portion of Mortuary Collection's budget on production design, and you can very clearly see this as money well spent on the screen, as the movie has a very detailed and beautifully designed, handcrafted look to it. In order to make this investment, Ryan did have to take money away from some other parts of the movie's budget. Ryan shot less coverage and had to do fewer takes, but as a result of the investment, the movie has a killer look to it, and nobody noticed the lack of coverage or fewer takes. So take note of the fact that there are parts of your movie's budget that you can cut without the audience noticing it. If you want one part of your movie to really stand out, figure out where you can cut budget and invest in that. Number 2, this is a big one. It never hurts to ask. Mortuary Collection had some pretty great centerpiece practical effects in it, which were done by Amalgamated Dynamics. Amalgamated Dynamics, also known as Studio ADI, is a legendary effects company. They do $100 million movies like Jurassic World, It, The Predator, and other huge blockbusters. They were clearly an effects studio that were well outside of Ryan's budget, but he cold emailed them, and in the end, they agreed to do the movie despite the lack of budget. This is a big testament to the fact that so many movies, particularly low-budget movies, come together because of a bunch of mini miracles. I've heard many stories about indie filmmakers with a no-budget movie who approach someone well above their budget and somehow persuade them to get involved. When it comes to making this happen, it's important to remember that the real currency here is passion. To get someone out of your league to do your movie, they have to be passionate about your project, and they have to see that passion in you. A lot of people in Hollywood, particularly established players, are getting tired of working within the studio system, and they hunger for something new, fun, and different that reminds them why they got into this business in the first place. If your project can give them this opportunity, you might have a shot of getting someone on board who can boost the quality of your project by a quantum leap. This is why it never hurts to ask. So aim for the fences and make those big, unreasonable pie-in-the-sky requests. The worst people can do is say no, but the best thing that can happen is they say yes. Number 3. You need an asset. Getting Mortuary Collection made was a very long road. One of the keys that opened doors to Ryan was the short that he shot for the Babysitter Murders. Ryan kickstarted the short, which acted as a critical asset for him when he was pitching the movie, because he had a tangible sample of what the rest of the film would look and feel like. If you pitch your movie to people by sending them a script, I hate to say it, but there's a really good chance they will not read it. But when you have something that somebody can watch that demonstrates your voice, your vision, and your ability to execute, it can be pretty helpful. This is yet another case for shorts, as well as a case for just getting started. Have something in the can that shows that you're the real deal, because collaborators and investors want to know that they're working with someone who can finish the project. So figure out what your asset is for your movie and make it. There's a good chance it will open doors for you. Number 4, don't listen to the masses. When Ryan first set out to make the Mortuary Collection, he was told by his reps that nobody likes anthology movies, they don't make money, and that he should abandon the project. First of all, this hatred for subgenres seems to happen more in horror than any other genre. First, people were shitting on found footage, and then horror comedies, and now horror anthologies. Don't listen to any of it. Yes, it's important to consider the marketability of your movie, but most of this thinking is short-sighted. As we all know, horror anthologies are making a huge comeback now, and there was even an article in the New York Times about how it's the heyday for horror anthologies. Had Ryan listened to the naysayers, he'd missed out on this golden era for horror anthologies, and we would have been cheated out of the Mortuary Collection. So let the haters hate and make your movie anyway. Anyway, guys, thank you as always for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean the world to me if you shared it with your friends and family on social media. Don't forget to follow the show on Instagram at I'm Nick Taylor, that's I am Nick Taylor, and on Twitter at the same handle. Thanks again for listening to The Nick Taylor Horror Show.